Steve's car is a co-star, and had that car been introduced or...
I was doing a film with Burt down in Georgia called Gator.
I'm shooting for a Casablanca, and you know what I'll do when I get my Casablanca?
You know, had it been a little...
Imagine watching one of the most famous car chase movies ever made and realizing that almost every scene has mistakes you never noticed before. Skid marks from 15 different takes visible on the same road. Car damage that appears and disappears like magic. A hero car so broken it had to be pushed into position while the cameras rolled. And the craziest part, none of it mattered. The movie still became the second biggest film of 1977, beating Star Wars on opening weekend. This is the wild story of Smokey and the Bandit, and when you see what really happened behind the scenes, you'll never watch it the same way again. Before we dive into all the incredible mistakes and bloopers that made it into the final cut, you need to understand how this movie even got made, because the story behind Smokey and the Bandit is almost as crazy as the movie itself. It all started with a man named Hal Needham, who had one of the most insane careers in Hollywood history. Hal wasn't a director, he wasn't a writer, he was a stuntman, and not just any stuntman. He was the kind of guy who had broken 56 bones in his body, broken his back twice, punctured a lung, and lost more teeth than he could count. Every scar on his body told a story of a car crash, a building jump, or a stunt gone wrong. One time, Hal strapped a rocket to the back of a pickup truck for a stunt. The explosion left him with a broken back, 6 shattered ribs, 1 punctured lung, and 3 missing teeth. And you know what he did? He joked about it later. He was that kind of guy. He even admitted that sometimes he would ask camera operators to miss the perfect shot on purpose so he could do the stunt again and get paid twice. That's how he survived in an industry that rewarded danger but didn't care much about the people risking their lives. Hal earned respect in Hollywood through sheer toughness. On the set of a movie called The Undefeated in 1969, he tried teaching John Wayne how to fake a punch, but it embarrassed Wayne in front of the crew. Later that night, the Duke cornered Hal in a bar, put him in a headlock, and growled through the tension until things settled down. They walked out as friends. That was Hal Needham. He could turn enemies into allies just by refusing to back down. The idea for Smokey and the Bandit came to Hal in 1976 while he was working on a movie called Gator in Georgia. His driver friend left 2 cases of Coors beer in his hotel room, and Hal noticed the maid quietly stealing bottles one by one. He wondered why anyone would risk their job for beer. That curiosity pulled him into a story stranger than he expected. It turns out Coors couldn't legally be sold east of the Mississippi River because it had no preservatives and needed constant refrigeration during transport. Back in 1974, Time magazine explained that Coors was only available in 11 states. People smuggled it across the country like it was contraband. There were even stories about cases being flown on Air Force One because it was so sought after. Hal realized this weird little problem could fuel an entire movie. A cross-country beer run carried the spirit of an outlaw challenge, and he could feel a story forming in his head before he even put pen to paper. So he wrote the script as a small B-movie with a $1 million budget. The plan was simple. Jerry Reed, a country music star who'd worked with Burt Reynolds before, would play the bandit. The story would follow someone hauling 400 cases of Coors from Texarkana to Atlanta in 28 hours for an $80,000 reward. In today's money, that would be over $300,000. But there was a huge problem. Jerry Reed's name alone wasn't enough to convince studios to take a chance on Hal's first directing job. No one would finance the film unless a major star joined the project. The studios weren't just hesitating, they were shutting doors in Hal's face. Every time Hal walked in with a script and Jerry Reed's name attached, executives would smile. But the moment Hal added that he would be the director, conversations fell apart. They didn't believe a stuntman belonged behind a camera. Hal said later that he got used to the hemming and hawing before they threw him out. Hollywood saw stuntmen as people who were good at falling, not storytelling. Then the turning point came from inside Hal's own home. Burt Reynolds was actually living with him at the time after Hal's wife had kicked him out. Hal handed over the script, waited through the night, and braced himself for whatever Burt had to say. The next morning, Burt told him the dialogue was the worst he'd ever read. Ouch. But then Burt also said the idea worked and offered something Hal never dared ask for. If Hal could use Bert's star power to find someone willing to put up the money, Hal could direct the film. That promise carried real weight. Universal Pictures finally agreed to finance Smokey and the Bandit for $5.3 million. But here's where things got crazy. Just 2 days before filming started in 1977, the studio sent someone to cut the budget by $1 million. Burt Reynolds' salary alone was $1 million, which left Hal with only $3.3 million to shoot the entire movie. Hal and his assistant director, David Hamburger, stayed awake for 30 straight hours rebuilding the shooting plan, turning shrinking resources into new ways to keep the movie alive. Jerry Reed felt the effects of all these changes more directly than anyone else. He'd been prepared to carry the movie as the Bandit, but once Burt stepped in, Jerry was shifted to the role of Snowman, the truck driver moving the illegal beer. The story changed shape around the new casting. Although Jerry handled it with grace, later years he finally got to play the Bandit in Smokey and the Bandit Part 3 in 1983, though that movie didn't do nearly as well. Burt Reynolds might have joined the production, but he never softened his opinion of the script. He told Hal again that the dialogue was terrible. Still, he agreed to make the film because he believed in Hal, and since the script felt too stiff, he suggested they improvise. Sally Field, who played the runaway bride, Frog, later said that almost the entire film was improvised by the cast. That's why the humor felt so loose and natural. The scenes people loved most grew out of moments on set rather than anything written on Hal's legal pads. Many things changed as Hal reworked the script. Early drafts used different names for nearly everyone. Sally Field's character Carrie was originally named Kate. Big Enos and Little Enos had completely different names. Even the reward for the beer run changed from a new truck to $80,000 in cash. But the biggest change came when Jackie Gleason took control of the Sheriff Buford Justice role and shaped it into something unforgettable. Now here's where things get really interesting. Jackie Gleason was a legend. He was famous for The Honeymooners and then been a huge star for decades, but he had one very specific way of working that drove people absolutely crazy. He hated rehearsals. He claimed to have a photographic memory and would read a script only once. While other actors rehearsed with his stand-in, Jackie would watch quietly from the side. When cameras finally rolled, it was his first real performance. Everything he said, every movement, every pause was created live in the moment. According to Hal Needham, nearly 3/4 of everything Jackie said on screen was never written down. Burt Reynolds later confirmed it, saying Jackie never spoke a single scripted line. He rebuilt the character in real time, turning Sheriff Justice into something unforgettable through rhythm, timing, and pure instinct. That freedom led directly to the movie's most quoted moment, the diner scene where Sheriff Justice storms in demanding a Diablo sandwich and a Dr. Pepper did not exist on paper in any form. Jackie made it up on the spot. No rehearsal, no second take. Even the entire choke and puke encounter where Justice unknowingly sits next to the Bandit came straight from Jackie's imagination during filming. He was given full permission to invent scenes, change dialogue, and follow his instincts. The Diablo sandwich itself wasn't even a real menu item anywhere. Jackie invented it in the moment, and every reference to it since traces back to that single scene. Even the way he stretched words into something musical became part of the culture. Sally Field almost wasn't part of the film at all. She read the script and thought it had little substance. In her memoir, she said she wanted to skip it entirely. She was trying to rebuild her career as a serious actress and feared the movie would make her seem unserious again. She'd already turned down television roles for 3 years to reshape her image, but Burt saw something in her that the studio didn't. He insisted she was perfect for the role and promised they could shape the material through improvisation. Universal Pictures hesitated because they didn't see her as glamorous enough. They wanted someone more traditionally attractive, someone they believed could draw bigger crowds. Burt fought them on it until they backed down. He later admitted he'd always admired her work and felt she would bring heart to the film. Their on-screen chemistry was real because their relationship was real. They fell in love during filming in August 1976, and that romance became one of Hollywood's most talked about relationships through the late 70s and early 80s. But now, let's get to the cars, because this is where the bloopers and mistakes really start piling up. Pontiac supplied 4 1977 Trans Am Special Edition models and 2 Le Mans sedans for the shoot in Georgia, but the high-speed chases and jumps absolutely destroyed them.
The Trans Ams were actually 1976 models fitted with massive 455 cubic inch engines, and they weren't built to handle what Hal was asking them to do. The jump over the Mulberry Bridge used a booster rocket similar to what Evel Knievel tried at the Snake River Canyon. The car didn't survive the landing. By the end of filming, 3 cars were completely gone, and the 4th was falling apart piece by piece. As filming continued, the remaining Trans Am could barely move. The crew patched it with duct tape, spare parts from wrecked cars, and quick coats of paint so it looked good enough for each shot. In the final scenes, the hero car wouldn't even start. Crew members literally pushed it into place while the camera rolled. Sheriff Justice's police cruiser wasn't in any better shape. The constant swapping of parts created strange moments that made it into the final cut. And this is where the bloopers get really obvious if you know what to look for. A black fender appeared, disappeared, then returned again in different scenes. Collision damage vanished between shots. Even the Trans Am's odometer showed the exact same mileage early in the film and later, even though they were supposed to have traveled hundreds of miles. The production never had time to fix any of this. Universal kept cutting resources while they filmed, reducing crew members and speeding up the schedule. Scenes had to be shot once or not at all. Locations were reused again and again. Everyone worked under heavy Georgia heat with no room for mistakes. The editing team received footage too quickly and too inconsistently to correct continuity problems, so many errors stayed in the final product that it became part of the film's charm. When Bandit picks up Frog early in the movie, if you look closely at the road, you can see skid marks from at least 15 different takes clearly visible. They shot that scene over and over, and nobody bothered to clean up the road between takes. Sheriff Justice's police cruiser door opens, closes, and then completely rips off within seconds due to continuity errors between shots. The Trans Am's antenna breaks off, then magically reappears, then disappears again in different scenes. The wheels on the cars change styles between shots because they were constantly swapping parts from wrecked vehicles. In the football field crash scene, there's a concrete structure that suddenly turns into wood mid-impact because they couldn't afford to rebuild it properly. A green Cadillac appears in Alabama, then somehow shows up again in Georgia, jumping across scenes and locations. These aren't subtle mistakes. Once you notice them, you can't unsee them. And yet, when the movie came out, nobody cared. When Smokey and the Bandit was finished, Universal Pictures thought they had a disaster on their hands. They premiered the film at Radio City Hall in New York City, expecting applause and buzz. Instead, it landed completely flat. Studio executives walked away convinced they were staring at a massive failure. With almost no faith left, they made one last desperate move. They quietly pushed the movie into the southern United States only, opening it in just 386 theaters below the Mason-Dixon line over Memorial Day weekend in 1977. In Hollywood terms, that kind of release usually meant a slow death. Studios only did that when they'd completely given up on a film. But something absolutely incredible happened almost immediately. By the Tuesday after that holiday weekend, the film had already pulled in more than $2.6 million. Word spread like wildfire. By the end of June, it was playing across Charlotte, Atlanta, Jacksonville, New Orleans, Memphis, Dallas, and Oklahoma City. Southern audiences turned a supposed flop into a runaway hit simply by telling their friends to go see it.
The numbers that followed were even harder to believe. Smokey and the Bandit officially opened on May 27, 1977 in only 498 theaters and earned about $1.2 million that first weekend. That same weekend, Star Wars opened in only 43 theaters and made about $1.4 million. That meant Smokey technically outperformed Star Wars in total dollars on opening weekend. The difference showed up in the details, though. Star Wars averaged more than $36,000 per theater, while Smokey brought in about $3,000 per screen. But instead of burning out like most movies do, Smokey kept growing. Its final multiplier reached an astonishing 73 times its opening weekend. Most blockbusters make their money fast and fade away. This one built momentum slowly, week after week, powered almost entirely by word of mouth. Against a production budget of just $4.3 million, the movie went on to earn over $126 million domestically. Only Star Wars ranked higher in the United States that year with $221 million. By the end of July 1977, Smokey and the Bandit expanded beyond the South and rolled into theaters nationwide. At that point, it became the third highest-grossing film in U.S. history. What made the achievement even more remarkable was that it competed directly with Star Wars all summer long and still packed theaters. Globally, the film crossed $300 million, which equals roughly $512 million when adjusted for inflation. That translated into nearly a 7,000% return on investment, placing it among the most profitable projects Universal Pictures had ever released. For Burt Reynolds, the movie meant something deeply personal. In 2015, he said Smokey and the Bandit was his favorite film and the most fun he ever had making one. That admission surprised many people because Burt initially thought the script was terrible. He agreed to star anyway because he trusted the concept and his friendship with Hal. In 2017, Burt returned to Jonesboro, Georgia, for the film's 40th anniversary, joining fans for barbecues, car shows, and outdoor screenings. He was already the #1 box office star in America at the time of release, and this film sealed his place as a cultural icon. That same chemistry extended off-screen, especially with Sally Field. When filming began in 1977, their connection was immediate and real. Burt was 11 years older and already a superstar, while Sally was rising fast. Crew members noticed the tension instantly. Jerry Reed later said you could feel it in the air, like watching two teenagers fall in love. But cracks appeared early in their relationship. At a promotional event, fans lined up for Sally's autograph more than Burt's. Instead of laughing it off, he became visibly upset. That moment exposed a jealousy few people expected from Hollywood's biggest star. The tension deepened in 1980 when Sally earned an Oscar nomination for Norma Ray. Burt refused to attend the Academy Awards with her and bluntly asked if she really thought she would win. He even tried to stop her from attending the Cannes Film Festival. Sally went to the Oscars with friends instead. When she won on March 31, 1980, she thanked her family and said nothing about Burt. Behind the confident image Burt projected, Sally later revealed a man who struggled deeply with insecurity. As her career grew, he tried to push her into a smaller role in his life. She later said that once she walked through the door, everything became his way. She admitted she dressed for him, moved for him, and slowly stopped existing as herself. Though he asked her to marry her several times, she refused, sensing his heart wasn't truly in it. One scene in Smokey and the Bandit hit especially close to home for Sally. The moment where Frog tries to leave but gets drawn back to Bandit mirrored their real relationship too closely. Sally told the director she didn't want to shoot it that day because it felt painfully familiar. She nearly quit over that moment. Even decades later, she admitted there's one scene from that film she still refuses to watch because it reminds her of a version of herself she barely recognizes. Their romance lasted 5 years and ended in 1982. They didn't speak for the final 30 years of his life. Before his death in 2018, Burt still called her the love of his life. In December 2022, Sally appeared on a talk show and named Burt as her worst on-screen kiss, joking about excessive drooling. The comment stunned fans who remembered his romantic reputation. But let's get back to the bloopers and the incredible impact this flawed masterpiece had on the world. When Smokey and the Bandit arrived in theaters in May 1977, it did more than entertain. It changed the car industry. Pontiac sold 68,745 Trans Ams in 1977. In 1978, that number jumped to 93,341, an increase of almost 25,000 cars in a single year. Hal Needham later said the movie alone added about 25,000 sales. By 1979, production reached a record 117,000 Trans Ams, the highest number since the model debuted in 1969. The impact becomes even clearer when you look back to 1976, when fewer than 20,000 Trans Ams were sold. In just 2 years, sales had multiplied several times over. Dealers were flooded with requests for black and gold models, and the Trans Am suddenly became America's dream car. The success was so strong that Pontiac made a rare decision. The third-generation Firebird and Trans Am were supposed to arrive in 2020, but executives pushed the launch to 2022 to keep the second-generation Bandit car alive. That kind of delay was almost unheard of in the automotive industry. The black paint, gold trim, and giant screaming chicken hood decal became iconic. Pontiac first introduced the decal in 1973 for $55, and by 1976 it was standard on special edition models. The 1977 movie locked it into history forever. Critics mocked it at the time, but the public fell in love. Posters of the Trans Am hung on bedroom walls like rock stars. Pontiac had taken a gamble by giving Hal Needham 4 Trans Ams for free. 3 were destroyed during filming. The 4th barely made it to the final scene and had to be pushed into frame. That gamble turned into one of the most successful product placements ever. One of the most beloved characters in the movie wasn't even human. Fred, the Basset Hound, was chosen by Burt Reynolds for one specific reason. The dog refused to listen. Burt wanted the most stubborn animal possible, so Jackie Gleason's frustration would be real. Fred ignored commands, wandered out of frame, and did whatever he wanted. Jackie's reactions weren't acting, they were genuine frustration with a dog that wouldn't cooperate. Audiences felt that honesty, and the strange bond between an angry sheriff and a disobedient dog became one of the film's most memorable running jokes. So, here's the incredible truth about Smokey and the Bandit. It was made on a shoestring budget that got cut at the last second. The cars fell apart during filming. Mistakes are visible in almost every scene. The script was called the worst ever by its own star, and yet none of it mattered. The movie became a cultural phenomenon that beat Star Wars on opening weekend, changed the car industry forever, and created moments of improvised genius that people still quote today. The bloopers and errors that should have buried the film became part of its charm. The skid marks from 15 takes on the road, the vanishing car damage, the antenna that breaks and reappears, the wheels that change styles, the structures that turn from concrete to wood, the green Cadillac that teleports across state lines. All of it is there if you look closely. And all of it proves that sometimes the things that make a movie imperfect are exactly what make it perfect. Smokey and the Bandit reminds us that heart beats perfection every single time. A group of friends making a movie they believed in, improvising their way through scenes, pushing broken cars into frame, and refusing to let budget cuts kill their dream. That spirit shows through every frame. That's why audiences fell in love with it. That's why it's still beloved almost 50 years later, not despite its flaws, but because of them. If this story amazed you, hit that like button right now. Share this video with someone who loves classic movies or grew up watching Burt Reynolds tear up the road in that black and gold Trans Am. And subscribe to our channel because we bring you the incredible true stories behind the movies you love, the secrets the studios tried to hide, and the bloopers that made it all worth watching. Thanks for being here, and remember, sometimes the best things in life are a little bit broken, and that's exactly what makes them beautiful.